Hi Angels. This will be the chapter 18 of You Are My Heroes by Lavender Thoughts 21 on AO3. The pie incident. Once they crossed the street, it was a straight shot to Taishiro's house. Izuku let go of Aizawa's hand as soon as they reached the sidewalk, but still held on to Katsuki's hand, taking advantage of the only situation Bakugo found acceptable for him to do so. It was clear to Aizawa that Bakugo didn't tolerate physical contact from strangers, and only minimal contact with those he deemed trustworthy. Midoriya, on the other hand, might be more open to the idea of positive physical contact, like a pat on the head, or maybe even a hug. This, however, was limited to Bakugo, and the blonde didn't like to engage in those comforts. Rather, he saw it as a nuisance, so he let go of Izuku's hand when they reached the front door. "I'm only going to chat with Taishiro for a second, then we can go back home, okay?" Aizawa explained the situation to the boys. It was not that he was in a rush to go home, but he didn't want to stress them out by making them interact with an unfamiliar kid while being in an unfamiliar house. Tashiro's house was easy to recognize since it was the only house on the block with a front fence. The fence wasn't tall, in fact it only reached Aizawa's waist. Despite being a fence, it was actually inviting looking, the size not being tall enough to keep out intruders, and the tops were rounded, not spiked. Even the color was friendly enough. The white didn't exactly scream go away, inviting even. Aizawa knocked on the door, and a rustling was heard as Taishiro rushed to the door. The man looked skinnier than the first time the boys met him, more muscular and less round. The only reason the boys could recognize him was because of the yellow sweater he always wore. The same sweater he wore when they were caught red-handed in the corner store yesterday. "Aizawa, nice to see you, buddy. Came to check on me. How are the kids?" Tashiro opened the door with a smile on his face, kneeling down to Bakugo and Midoriya's level. The sudden attention and eye contact made Izuku jump back in surprise and look away from the man immediately. The green boy grabbed Bakugo's hand for comfort, but the blonde quickly shook it off, so instead Midoriya grabbed the end of Bakugo's shirt. Bakugo and Midoriya, right? Tashiro waited for a response, but only got an annoyed huff from Katsuki. The blonde stared, glaring at the man with unblinking eyes. In Bakugo's mind he had to maintain eye contact, or else he seemed weak and afraid. And he was not. The blonde was still uncomfortable with meeting the stranger because he grabbed the chew necklace from his chest and put it in his mouth, biting down hard. "You boys aren't going to respond?" Aizawa asked, and Midoriya shook his head viciously no. Aizawa didn't push them to formally introduce themselves. He understood that this action was very uncomfortable for them. It would be something they would learn later in life to properly interact with others. "That's okay, my name's Taishiro. I'm Aizawa's friend." Taishiro introduced himself and waited a couple of seconds to see if they would follow his example, but it proved unfruitful. Still, Taishiro held his patient smile until it was obvious they weren't going to respond. "Sorry, they don't like strangers." Aizawa apologized on the kids' behalf, but Taishiro immediately shook his head no. "Don't apologize, it's fine. Can we play in the yard, Aizawa?" Midoriya asked. "It's Aizawa, and yes you can. Don't leave the yard, okay?" The man told him, and Midoriya nodded in response, starting his trace of the lawn's perimeter. "Bakugo?" Aizawa questioned as the boy stood next to him without budging. The boy kept his intense stare at Taishiro, even though he was free to leave as well. "Look over there, there's some pebbles. Go ahead and play too." Aizawa directed Katsuki's gaze to the pebbles around the corner of the porch. Katsuki broke eye contact and glimpsed towards the pebbles. It was obvious that the pebbles were meant to surround bushes like Aizawa's house, except it appeared that Taishiro wasn't much of a green thumb. There were only shriveled twigs spaced evenly along the pebbles, the leftovers of a massacre of bushes. To Bakugo it just meant he didn't have to sit on the edge to avoid branch bristles. With that said, the blonde forgot about the non-existent staring contest and went straight for the rocks. Midoriya already made his way around the lawn by this time and took his place next to Bakugo. Aizawa continued to chat with Taishiro about the foster kids they are fostering. Aizawa keeping his statements short but insightful about Bakugo and Midoriya's special care. Taishiro asked for advice about the boy he's fostering, a special case with medical treatments and abuse allegations. The young boys a couple of feet away didn't care about any of that, though. Instead, Bakugo had his head close to the ground, his ear practically touching the pebbles. Midoriya was above him, counting the tiny rocks in his hands before letting them go crashing next to Bakugo's head. The ricochet of the pebbles would sometimes hit Katsuki on his face, but the boy didn't mind at all. It didn't cause pain, and it was a small price to pay for the enjoyment of hearing the clicking of bouncing pebbles. The boys continued to play like this for a couple of seconds before getting bored and deciding to line up the pebbles, just like they have done before in patterns of numbers and colors. Aizawa turned his head to the sudden stop of dropping pebbles, but relaxed again as he saw them playing. Unfortunately for Taishiro, Bakugo had caught a whiff of cinnamon in the wind. The blonde turned his nose in the air at the scent of apple cinnamon, his eyes darting around before landing on a pie resting at the edge of an opened windowsill. Shh! Bakugo made a soft shushing noise, catching Midoriya's attention and earning him a sideways glance. "What is it, Kachan?" Izuku whispered, getting closer to Katsuki so the blonde could hear him. "Pie!" Bakugo said the words in an excited whisper as he pointed at the open window. "Yummy," Midoriya said out loud, and Bakugo cringed at the sudden exclamation. The blonde turned around to see Aizawa, but the man didn't get a hint of their sudden excitement. "Shush!" Bakugo said once he saw their cover wasn't blown. Midoriya put his hands over his mouth and softly apologized. Luckily for the boys, Aizawa didn't see the need to keep a close eye on them. The white fence that surrounded them made sure they couldn't run off, and Aizawa had an ear out for them, meaning they couldn't open the gate without alerting him. The boys walked up to the window, but there was a quite amount of height to their intended target. To their luck, there was a brick nearby. Bakugo lifted it up and huffed at the weight, Midoriya jumping in to help as he noticed Katsuki's trouble. With that one brick, they got an extra 4 inches of height, but there was still an amount to go. They looked around for other bricks, but found none. They sat there and pondered for a second, Bakugo placing his chew necklace back in his mouth, as he thought, while Midoriya rocked on his heels. "What if you lift me?" Midoriya asked, and Bakugo looked at him for a second, thinking it over. Ultimately, the blonde saw no other option but to go ahead with the green one's plan. Bakugo crouched down and tapped his shoulders, signaling Midoriya to wrap his legs around his neck. Izuku looked nervous but continued with his own plan. Katsuki shakily got up, the weight of Izuku almost too much for him, but the boy bared with it. "Step up," Bakugo ordered quietly, but Midoriya was too scared to unwrap his arms around his friend's head. Bakugo clicked his tongue annoyed, and gave Midoriya's calf a sharp bite for encouragement. Midoriya winced in pain, but received the message to his displeasure. With the fear of another bite, Midoriya began to stand on Bakugo's shoulders, using the wall as support for his balance. It was difficult at first, but eventually Midoriya was standing shakily on Bakugo's shoulders, most of his body weight leaning on the wall. The pie was in plain view. This, however, was the least interesting thing Midoriya saw, because just behind the pie and across the room he saw a kid sitting at a dining table. The kid Midoriya saw was a boy with half white and half red hair, split right down the middle. There was a bandage on the boy's left eye, but his right was a soft gray that eyed Midoriya curiously. Midoriya froze for a second, the nerves of being caught doing something bad, making him stiffen up like a deer seeing headlights. However, the fear dispersed when the boy across the room gave him a friendly wave. A boisterous laugh from Taishiro frightened Izuku, causing his knees to shake and lose balance. The stumbling caused Bakugo to lose his balance as well, sending them both flying backward into the soft grass behind them. Bakugo clicked his tongue annoyed as he saw Midoriya empty-handed. "There's a boy in there, little like me and Kakan," Midoriya explained in quiet whispers, his green eyes shining in excitement. Bakugo's eyes widened slightly with a new interest in the stranger kid Midoriya was talking about. "My turn," Bakugo pointed to the wall, so Izuku could take a turn being the support. With Bakugo up on Izuku's shoulder, he easily balanced himself and made it to the window without a problem. The blonde's crimson eyes met a soft gray across the room. Bakugo tilted his head, seeing the condition of the strange kid. The kid across from him mimicked Bakugo's head tilt, but held a neutral face, unfazed by the mischief unfolding right in front of him. "Half and half," Bakugo mumbled under his breath as he saw the way the other boy's hair was bicolored. Bakugo continued to stare at the boy, who was just sitting at the table with a plate of food in front of him. Once the boy saw that Bakugo was going to continue staring, he offered the blonde a friendly wave like he did with Midoriya. This time Bakugo copied the boy's example and gave him a wave back. That was the end of their interaction, because the smell of the cooling apple pie made it impossible for the Bakugo to ignore it. That being said, the pie was just out of reach of Bakugo's grasp, since he was just peeking over his hands, only reached a couple inches off the edge. He needed another couple of inches to even touch the pie. "Kachan, hurry," Izuku said as his knees began to wobble. The weight of another kid on top of him was too much, even with the leaning on the wall. Bakugo stepped on his tippy toes, keeping an incredible balance on Midoriya's shoulders. Still, he was a couple of centimeters too short to reach the sweet and savory treat. That's when the stranger kid across Bakugo hopped off his chair and disappeared to the depths of below Bakugo's visibility. Katsuki watched as the chair moved towards the counter, and the kid popped up closer to him. Bakugo began to sneer. thinking that the kid was going to take the pie away, but that's not what happened. Instead, the boy pushed the pie tray closer to Bakugo until it was in his grasp. "Thanks," Bakugo mumbled, and the boy just gave a firm nod. Bakugo picked up the pie, but the weight of its contents was unexpected. As soon as the pie was off the counter, Midoriya's knee gave out from exhaustion, so he fell to his knees, causing Bakugo to fall backward on his butt. Luckily, the pie was unscathed, and they were perfectly fine as well. "Good job, Kashan," Midoriya praised as he turned to find Bakugo with the pie. Bakugo turned towards Aizawa, who was a good distance away. The man was too busy talking to Taishiro to really pay attention to what the boy's doing. In fact, the man had a pained expression on his face as he continued to talk with Taishiro, who listened with understanding. That didn't concern Bakugo, mostly because he was too young to understand the complex emotions of adulthood, but also because there was a full pie in front of him. All he really wanted to know was if they were home free to devour the sweet treat currently resting on his lap. With the coast clear, Bakugo took the initiative and grabbed a fistful of pie, not caring about how messy or how disrespectful to the pie it was. With a mouthful of apple cinnamon pie, Bakugo clenched his fist and smiled as the sweet flavor invaded his taste buds. "It's yummy," Bakugo said and grabbed another fistful, this time offering it to Midoriya. This act of messiness displeased the green-haired boy. Rather, Izuku found it unsettling how Bakugo could just eat with the stickiness on his hands. "I don't want to be sticky," Midoriya began to pout with watery eyes. The feeling of despair comes from the effort he put into obtaining the sweet treat, only to not be able to eat a piece. Bakugo ate the piece in his hand, but stopped immediately after that. His brain was trying to figure out a way for Midoriya to eat. The boy looked up to the window again, thinking that maybe he could reach a fork or spoon from the sink. However, he didn't need to think once he saw the face of the stranger kid looking down at him. "Half and half," Bakugo pointed at the kid at the window, who just stared down at them. "It's the kid, hi," Midoriya waved at the boy peering down. "Hi," the kid said back, his voice keeping a neutral tone. "You guys want spoons?" "Yes, please," Midoriya whisper yelled, and the boy disappeared for a second before coming back with a handful of spoons and forks, probably thinking that they might prefer one over the other. The kid reached down, and Midoriya reached up for the utensils. This, however, didn't pan out well. With their heights, half and half, being taller than them both, they still had a foot of space between themselves. Midoriya began to tippy-toe, and the strange kid pushed himself more outward. This action, however, resulted in the kid accidentally pushing himself off the ledge and crashing into the grass next to Midoriya. The boy got up and shook off the grass blades off his head. He fell with his arm outstretched in front of him, so he didn't land on the sharp silver utensils. "Are you okay?" Midoriya asked, concern on his face as he jumped up and down with flapping arms. "Yeah, I'm fine," the boy answered, unnervingly unfazed by the sudden tumble. "I'm Izuku, and he's my best friend Katsuki. Who are you? How'd you get that OE on your eye?" "Does it hurt?" Midoriya introduced himself, but Bakugo huffed when he didn't get to introduce himself. "I'm Shoto." The strange kid introduced himself, ignoring all the other questions Midoriya asked. Izuku didn't mind, though. He just figured that he was the same as Katsuki, not a big talker. "Shoto," Midoriya mimicked his name and gave the boy a friendly smile. "Share?" Bakugo spoke, a peaceful offer of the stolen pie as a thank you for helping him reach it. "Yeah, let's share," Midoriya said, grasping one of the spoons from Shoto's hand. "Okay." Shoto agreed, not sounding very enthusiastic about the pie. The boy handed Bakugo a utensil too, and even though his hand was covered in pie filling, Bakugo grasped the fork anyway. All three of the boys sat there in the grass, sharing the pie with each other in peace. Midoriya is on the opposite side of Bakugo and Shoto, sitting in between them. "It's a shitty situation, Shouta, but my 2 cents is that you should call him back and soon." Taishiro's voice turned serious for just a second before being cheery again. "But for now, how about a piece of pie to lighten the mood? Freshly baked this morning and nicely cooled." The boys all froze at the mention of the pie. Unfortunately for the grown-ups, said pie was currently unsalvageable. The boys had been digging in with no rhyme or reason, just scooping and munching. "My pie is gone, and so is Shoto." Taishiro's panicked voice could be heard clearly since the boys were directly out the window. "What? He couldn't have gone far." Aizawa began to panic too as he heard that the kid was missing. The man turned to check up on his own foster kids and found an extra set of panicked eyes staring at him. Aizawa looked at the scene before him and couldn't help but let out a laugh. The kids' faces were covered in apple pie, and the way their eyes were wide made it clear that they knew what they were doing was wrong. "Why are you laughing? This is serious. I can't lose my first kid." Taishiro was heard rushing around and opening doors. "All missing things are accounted for," Aizawa said simply, and Tashiro rushed out the door and let out one of his boisterous laughs again. I don't know how you ended up like that, but it's clear you made new friends. Good job, Shoto. Taishiro praised his kid, and the boy gave a firm nod, his wide eyes softening as he realized he wasn't getting punished. That makes it official. These two are the most mischievous kids I have ever fostered. I'm sorry they roped in Todoroki as well. Aizawa apologized on behalf of the boys, but Tashiro shook it off. Hey, they're having fun. It was just a pie. I'm just glad my kid is having fun too. He is? Yeah, it may not look like it, but this is the happiest he's been while being here. I can just see it in his eyes. Ignoring Taishiro's poor choice of words, it was actually true, although Todoroki wasn't smiling. He didn't have the glazed-over look on his face of being stuck in a bad train of thought. Rather, he was too busy looking at the two other kids that showed up and going along with their shenanigans. Guess I have to go now. I need to clean them up. Aizawa sighed at the messy boys in front of him. Although Midoriya was fairly clean, Bakugo didn't really mind cleanliness by the way he let pie drop down to his shirt. Since they were wearing shorts, some of the pie made its way to his legs, making him sticky and sweet, a pristine way to get ant bites. Come along again. We enjoyed the company, right, Todo? Taishiro helped his kid off his feet, and Todoroki nodded. The man in the yellow sweater picked up the remains of the pie, Bakugo looking dejected about parting with his stolen snack. This is the end of Chapter 18. I'll see you in Chapter 19. Have a good day, angels!